Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Wayne McCulloch. We're broadcasting from the Pasbo office. Thank you so much for being with us. We have some very important information we want to share with you related to a recent Lower Merion case as it relates to fund balances, and we think it's important information, and thank you so much for being with us. With me are two people I have the highest regard and respect for. First, the Executive Director of Pasbo, Mr. Jay Himes. Jay, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Wayne.
Every day, Jay provides just outstanding leadership for all of us here at Pasbo, so thanks, Jay, and it's good to have you. Also is Hannah Barrick, and Hannah is our Director of Advocacy here at the Pasbo office, and Hannah plays such an important role with our legislators, but also providing important up-to-date information related to legislative actions and potential legislative actions, and providing advocacy for us here in the Pasbo, all of our members at Pasbo. So Hannah, thank you so much. First of all, Hannah, talk a little bit about the Lower Merion case and what it's all about, please.
So in early 2016, a group of taxpayers in Lower Merion School District filed suit against the district. They argued that the tax increase that was planned to go into effect for 2016-17, which was 4.4% increase, should not be permitted. And they argued that the school district had been misleading taxpayers, they were skirting the law, they were budgeting for deficits every year, ended up with surpluses every year, and that this money should go back to taxpayers. Some of the facts of the case, the school district did budget deficits for several years. They planned on using fund balance. They planned for tax increases. They went to PDE. They got exceptions to go above the index for a series of years. Certainly a lot of uncertainty happening over the past few years with respect to state funding and other revenues as well. The school district did end the year with surpluses for a series of years. They had some reductions in expenditures. They had some sort of good luck, I think, in some areas. And they moved those dollars, those surplus, into a capital reserve fund that was board approved and was intended to cover 5-year plans for technology, for transportation, and for facilities. At the end of the day, the judge ruled just at the very end of August against the school district and for the plaintiff taxpayers. And his ruling ordered the school district to not be able to collect, they couldn't enforce or collect the portion of their tax increase that exceeded their index. So they were planning to go to 4.4%. The judge said they could only collect and enforce the tax increase up to 2.4%, and this is for 16-17. Obviously, this case is going to be appealed. The school district is appealing this to Commonwealth Court, so we'll have to see what happens there. But that's sort of, in a nutshell, it is the situation.
So from a budget perspective, anticipating a deficit, they used fund balance as well as a tax increase above the index in order to balance the budget. In reality, then, for a few consecutive years, they ran a surplus.
Right.
And actually transferred some of that surplus then into a capital reserve fund as well.
That's right.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. Jay, what does that mean from your perspective?
Well, I think there's a couple important points in the decision that everybody needs to be aware of. One, the judge obviously was very critical of the district, which is a very large district, in excess of $200 million budget. As Hannah mentioned, capital facilities and transportation, they run their own transportation system, and a high level of service for technology. But he was very critical about these variations between their budget and their actuals. And again, we have a situation where school districts get criticized for not spending money. And you know as well as I do, you having done budgets for 28 years, that's how you want to end up the year. You want to end up with expenditures that are less than you budgeted for because you did a good job of managing your budget, or some of your projections weren't as high as you may have expected them to be. And so, as I've said before, business managers get paid to make sure revenues are in excess of expenditures, and that expenditures in excess of revenues can get you fired. So managing the budget, I don't think they made any violation of Act 1 or any violation of school code in doing that. Secondly, the issue is whether or not your projected budgeted dollars at the beginning of the year in terms of your filing for exceptions with PDE, whether or not there's supposed to be some history of whether those budgeted numbers are accurate and fair. Again, there's no provision in Act 1. You submit your exceptions based upon your budgeted numbers, and obviously you want to be as close as possible at the end of the year. But PD has no way of checking that. The district has no way of doing anything other than providing a good faith estimate. So again, I don't think the district was guilty of making any violation of Act 1. The fiduciary responsibility of the district to make sure it meets the needs of its kids, both from a transportation and safety standpoint, and the high level of service that Lower Merion School District provides in terms of technology, and having multiple buildings, more than 10 buildings, in terms of that infrastructure, all suggest that the ability to transfer dollars into capital reserve was a prudent thing to do. So again, I don't think in this case Lower Merion was guilty of anything that's not that unusual for a lot of other districts to want to do: produce surpluses, use it to fund capital expenditures over a period of time. But unfortunately, again, we have a situation where a school district gets criticized for coming in under budget.
Yeah, and I think you make a couple of really good points, Jay. And first of all, it's not that uncommon for school districts to operate in a surplus. And even prior to the economic recession and the difficulty in estimating revenues, and sometimes the difficulty in estimating truly all of your expenses, and we can talk briefly about that, school districts typically would operate with a surplus at the end of the year, and often use that moving forward to balance next year's budget.
Yeah.
And a couple of the good points I think you make: first of all, this is a very large budget. You're
Yeah.
talking in excess of $200 million. And some of the variables that can impact that budget, such as a school district that would currently be in negotiating status with various unions, could be the faculty, could be support staff, certainly can impact millions of dollars from the expense side. Even healthcare today, where many school districts are participating in self-insured consortiums, and a good or bad experience certainly can have a variance that's huge for school districts from an expense standpoint. And certainly a best practice wouldn't be to anticipate a great health experience and then not have enough money and have to cut student programs throughout the year. So,
Plus, Wayne, we also know this from the most recent budget survey. We know school districts can't cover increases in operating costs in terms of health care, in terms of pensions, in terms of charter schools, without doing something beyond tax increases, fund balance, and trying to cut expenditures, and likely in the personnel area. So you need to combine all those three factors just to cover those major increases in operating costs, much less other costs that go on, much less capital expenditures.
well stated. The implications, Hannah, from your perspective.
So I think even though this is an issue that's happening just in Lower Merion School District, and even though they're planning to appeal this and hopefully will be successful on the appeal, I think that's sort of not the end of the road for this. And there are pretty significant implications for all 500 school districts. And again, even if the judge at Commonwealth Court finds for the school district and overturns the Court of Common Pleas judge's decision, I think that the damage to some degree is already done. I think that school districts should expect some additional scrutiny, especially for some taxpayer groups that might be out there, and sort of expecting a little more transparency. We've heard some indications that there might be some other taxpayer groups that are looking to potentially file similar lawsuits as what happened in Lower Merion. So that's something to just be aware of, and certainly could happen anywhere across the state. I think also legislatively, we're expecting some type of response to this decision. Again, Harrisburg is full of legislative solutions to problems that sometimes don't actually exist, and I'm not sure exactly what that will look like yet, but the General Assembly, for the most part, is aware of this decision, and I think that will manifest itself in some type of legislative fix at some point. I think also this is going to play a big role in the spring when we start to talk about the 2017-18 budget, when we start to potentially talk about property tax reform. I think this comes back on the table and plays a big role. So something that we're all going to have to sort of work on, be aware of, and there really are implications for all 500 school districts.
Yeah, thank you. Jay, your thought on implications as well as maybe what school districts can do, business officials can do?
Sure. Hannah mentioned transparency, very important in this process. Be open, communicate often, and do the proper messaging. On the PD website, you can find all the fund balance. It's a 4-column spreadsheet. All it shows is dollars. It doesn't talk about how that money gets spent, what the plans are, why you've got committed, unassigned, why it's assigned. There's no explanation there, and the critics often just seize upon that and say, look at all these dollars school districts have. But you miss the important messaging, like we've seen in a recent school district where it says surplus used to buy textbooks. That's the kind of messaging I think we need to work on. And again, transparency so that your community is informed about what your long-term plans are, and connecting those dots for the money sitting in that unassigned fund balance and what that's going to be used for to improve instruction and student success in the future.
Yeah, I would agree. In my experience is just that as business officials begin budgeting the process, typically that process has already started, but really almost everyone will be engaged in the budget process no later than November. But I think it is a good practice to right away share that information related to fund balance with the board, with the community in open meetings, share the designated fund balance you have, the assigned fund balance, even undesignated fund balance, and what the purposes are and what the amounts are, what your projections are really for year end and what the use of that fund balance would be, as well as do you project the need to use some of that fund balance in order to balance next year's budget as well. So I think, Jay, that's well stated, as transparency is very, very important at that point. There's additional information related to this Lower Merion case on the PASBO's website at www.pasbo.org. I encourage you to go there, understand it, read it, because I think Hannah's right. Even if it hasn't happened yet, don't be surprised if it does rear its head by a community member or a board member asking questions related to it, and I think it's important that you're informed of the case as well as potentially some of the implications, as well as I think being able to say we are being transparent with our fund balance and the use of fund balance, and continue that process throughout your entire budget cycle. As well as in the next couple of weeks we'll post best practices as it relates to sharing fund balance reports, use of fund balance, how to budget for capital expenses, and so forth. I think some very important information that we'll get out to PASBO members as well. So for Jay Himes, Hannah Barrick, I'm Wayne McCullough. Thank you so much for being with us. I appreciate it.